Heads up, female leaders, executives, and entrepreneurs. We've just opened enrollment for the Spring Renegade Accelerator. You can head to renegadeaccelerator.com to check out all the information and apply.
But if you forget one critical ingredient, that fire will never, ever, ever ignite. And that ingredient is space.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step.
Just let go.
Juliet Funt is on the show today. She is a productivity wizard. And when I say that, I mean like a tactical, tangible. She shares the tips. She gets down into the tactics of how and what to do in order to create more space in your life, in your day. Juliet has done this for big companies, for individuals, entrepreneurs, and personally, I have implemented many of the things that I've learned from Juliet and even shared her wisdom with my own Renegade Collective community because it has been that effective. So when you look at your calendar, you look at your schedule on your computer, on your phone, one of the key takeaways that I learned from Juliet is that those blocks in our day, they're not supposed to touch each other, right? So if you have one color touching the next, that's an indicator that you're trying to do too much, right? You have to have that transition time, first of all. But she teaches you how to create those wedges between the blocks. That is one of 10 different things I've started implementing since listening and learning from Juliet. As a society, we've romanticized busy, and that's not a good thing. It really has started to catch up with us. We see the great resignation happening. We see people in complete burnout. Well, there's a lot we actually can do to undo the busyness. Julia is an ultimate voice of authority on this topic, and I'm so excited to share her with you today. Without further ado, here is Juliet Funt. Heads up, female leaders, executives, and entrepreneurs. We've just opened enrollment for the Spring Renegade Accelerator. All of the information is at renegadeaccelerator.com, so you can check it out, watch the videos, see the testimonials, see the results from everyone. We're on a mission to 10x the way you think and execute for maximum measurable results. We have had many Renegade Accelerator grads on this podcast as guests, so you can listen back and hear from them as well. This is really the career love of my life. So the Renegade Accelerator is an intensive, real-time virtual training program, and we provide that foundation for the Renegade mindset that then extends into everything you do. Climbing that corporate ladder, getting on boards, generating more wealth through investing. If you're fundraising, we also focus on that. Really building your personal brand to open up doors and be able to go where you want to go. We also focus on podcasting, partnerships, and publishing. Public speaking is also a big area of the curriculum. And getting on those stages, growing your thought leadership, becoming more of a voice of authority, and getting paid to do so. The curriculum is equal parts education, collaboration, and accountability. Accountability is key. Renegades are all about action, massive intentional action. And of the nearly 200 graduates that we have in this program now, they all say they came for the curriculum, the education, the content, and they stayed for the people. So once you graduate from the Renegade Accelerator, you become a part of the Renegade Collective, where you'll have access to peer circles, to experts, live events, in-person live events, and a network of women who open doors, who are committed to your growth. We are personally investing in one another. We are making introductions. We are hiring each other, sharing that expertise, and it's really created exponential growth for the community. If this piques your interest, head to renegadeaccelerator.com, take a look at everything, apply, and we will circle back with you. At the very least, if you're uncertain, you can sign up to receive our emails, and we'll walk you through a process to help you determine if this is a good fit and if it's a good fit right now. We do have limited seats, and we're excited. We already have an incredible roster who has joined this next cohort, so get that application in and head to renegadeaccelerator.com. Juliet, welcome to the Why Not Now show. I am so excited to have you on the show, and in the spirit of Why Not Now, let's hop in. Can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you had to ask yourself, why not now? We'll dissect that day, minute, hour, season, and just kind of look under the hood to see how you navigated from idea to action. And we love the tangible, tactical examples too. So what do you have?
I'm excited because your format and this question is causing me to break a rule for myself, which is that, but I have to do it because there's a story that I never, ever tell. It's never been told on a podcast before because it gives away a little bit of a surprise in the end of my book. But it is absolutely, without question, my Why Not Now story. So I have no choice but to tell it today to you. And it was 2018 in August. We were just transitioning out of a school that my three boys went to. They're at the time 8, 10, and 12. And this school was a 60-year-old school called a humanistic school. It's called Play Mountain Place in Los Angeles. And for 60 years, they had been teaching this incredibly unique way, but also teaching parents to parent in an incredibly unique way. And that's where I learned to be a parent. And we grew up in this cocoony, hippie, yummy, sweet community where the kids were really free and all the adults talked to the children the same way. And we were very, very spoiled from this environment. So when the kids were ready to go to their next school, we got really stuck. And we started looking at schools that felt private ones were, the fancy ones were too intensely academic. They had too much pressure. They were stupid expensive. The charters and the magnets were more heartfelt, but a lot of them, we wanted to move from LA. And for a charter or magnet, you have to already reside in the city before you can apply. So there was really no way that we could make plans based on applying to charters and magnets in other cities. And we were just locked. Now you add two other layers of context. One is, my husband and I are a really good team in a lot of ways, but we have a terrible asymmetry of he loves beachy hot and I love mountain fireplace, snowy cozy. And so in finding this new city, our differences there were killing us. And so we had the school problem. We couldn't leave this fantasy school. We were disagreeing on potential locations. So meanwhile, though, there was this little whisper coming from friends and other conversations and some research that I had been doing about a concept called world schooling. And I discovered that there were thousands of people all over the world who had decided to opt out of school and make travel the primary education for their children. And they went on the road for a year, 2 years, 3 years. We've met people who are on the road for 10 years, many of them in super simple ways with lower budgets, working all the time, some in fancier ways. And I decided that I wanted to do this. And I went to my husband. I said, I don't want to go to a school and I don't want to go to a new town. I want to go on the road. And he took a little while to cook the idea for himself and try it on for size. And then one morning I came into one of my crazy early mornings. I got to my desk at 6 a.m. and there was a heart-shaped map that said, let's go on the map. And we went and I said, why not now? And we went and we were in 14 countries in a little under 2 years when COVID hit. COVID did stop the travel, but it was by absolutely no comparison the single best decision I ever made in my whole life. And it's been the best experience I've ever had.
Okay, so there's a lot to talk about here. First of all, amazing. I was not expecting that to be the reason why you're in New Zealand right now.
We were actually supposed to be here 5 weeks 2 years ago. So that's how that went.
And you know what? You picked a good spot to land. When you mentioned world schooling, I just got the biggest grin because during the pandemic, we decided to sell our home and buy an RV, and we started to travel around. And I was listening to all these podcasts of these families that have done this. They usually do it, within North America and or just the US. And I learned a little bit about world schooling, which was a concept that is fascinating. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I hadn't really heard of it before. That sounds great and really romantic to a lot of people. And as someone, my husband and I lived on a boat for a while. Like we're game for anything. But with children, it does add a new little dynamic. The heart map was probably the first big green light in terms of the consensus, but most people don't actually put that into action. So when you knew that morning at 6 a.m. that, you got this kind of nod of I'm game from your partner, would you say that was the real green light, or did you kind of already know this was going to happen when you felt this in your heart?
You're gonna find out a lot about my marriage in the next 3 sentences. But if you are a person who gets hooked to an idea and you have a lot of capacity, it's really hard not to see that idea alive in your head the minute you really taste it. And for me, that was this, as I saw it in my head, and the map was just his way of saying, unleash the Kraken, go and make it happen. And that's one thing that I'm really good at, is taking an idea and making it happen. And so he gave me permission by that buy-in. And then I just started, and I was immediately into action of dreaming of places and figuring out, we didn't do it in the way. There are people who sell their house and then they have a bucket of money and they don't work. We didn't. I ran the company working all the time in time zones where I had 1 a.m. calls, in time zones when I had 3 a.m. calls, on both sides of that, sleep. And we had to figure out, how was my team going to do this? How were we going to operate all of our business model, training and consulting and everything? The way that we meet people that turn into our clients is all through keynotes. And that was going to stop for a long time. So we had to rethink our entire model of meeting people to work with. And there was a lot of work involved. And we tried to do it moderately. In fact, what was really interesting is we spent less on the road living than we did just regular old living in LA. And so there was a lot of different layers to it. And it was a magnificent opportunity to release control. There was a wonderful saying I heard once: control or growth, pick one. And you get to do one of those two things. It was in my head when I sat my team down and said, you're going to do some of this without me. And boy, if you're an executive and you want to see what people are capable of, just get out of the way and move aside. And it was incredible. So there was growth in so many different areas, and we didn't even talk about the family yet.
Whoa. Okay. So this is, it sounds like we're wired very similar, not only as individuals, but in our marriages. I wanted to get to what you do as well, within your career and your life work, because I think my guess is that you enable and a lot of what you do unlocks what I refer to as map freedom, right? It's just, it can, if it's, taken into a certain direction. But the logistics of having a family and doing this, and the courage to actually take the first step, how much did you plan in advance? Because I imagine that's a shifting roadmap. Well, clearly with the pandemic, but
yeah, you have to take the pandemic out of it to really get into the mindset of that moment. I talked to other world schoolers and they said there is this dichotomy between the more you plan, the more secure you feel, but the more you plan, the more stuck you are in that plan. So if improvisation strikes, it's a little harder to go, we love this place. Let's stay for 2 more weeks because you've already planned the lodging and you've already gotten the miles tickets. And so I just tried to ride that balance really mindfully of a little loose, a little tight, a little planned, a little not, miles tickets where I needed them and in advance and cash reserves where I could be improvisational. And I was aware of that. My children luckily were 8, 10, and 12 at the time. If they had been where they are now, 11, 13, just turned 16, there would have been a lot more votes of other people that would have messed up my plan, but they were still at an age where they didn't really come to the table to vote on every transition. It was just me and my husband at that point.
Gotcha. Ooh, can you say that again? The more you plan, the more you feel secure, did you say?
You have solidity. You can have control and solidity, and you can have an expectation of the movie you're about to walk into when you have a plan. You can also save a lot of money because you can book things in advance and be a really frugal and smart shopper of travel and cars and Airbnbs and things like that. But you lose the muse of, oh my gosh, we just met this family from Israel and they're going to go to Krabi, Thailand for a weekend. What if we just went with them? You can't do that if you're booked into the next place. So that was a balance the whole time. Still is a balance.
Oh, I love this so much. Okay. So when I first became aware of you, you were doing a keynote for a friend, Jim Quick, who's been on this podcast, as has Shannon Lee, Bruce Lee's daughter, who's a friend who's been on the podcast a couple times as well. And I remember sitting in my seat and saying, oh, she's got it figured out. I need this. I think everybody does, right? And that must have been maybe, 2015-ish, I'm guessing. And can you tell us about what you unlock for people and corporations and what that secret sauce magic that I felt sitting there? Can you add some context and articulate what you do?
Sure. So on the business card is we run a training and consulting company that helps other companies to reduce busyness, find more time for thoughtfulness, and make work more sane, humane, effective, and thoughtful. And that's really our mission in the world. But to understand why I do what I do and the underbelly of it, you have to understand the foundational metaphor of our work and also of the book. If you've cracked the book, it's the opening story of the book, which is the metaphor of building a fire. I grew up in Manhattan, so I never really learned this as a kid, but somebody taught me, and what they taught me was that the materials of the fire are really important and that they should be in layers. You should have something dry and crumbly, newspaper or pine needles. You should have something like pine cones or fire starter to really ignite. And then ideally you have different kinds of wood. I didn't know that softwood is to catch quick and hardwood is to burn long. And you can do all these things right. But if you forget one critical ingredient, that fire will never, ever, ever ignite. And that ingredient is space. It is the space between combustibles that makes them ignite. And that oxygenating room is what we do not have in the world of work. And we did not have it before COVID, and we terrifyingly have less of it now than we even did before. The room, the space to not only recover and breathe, but also to think, to be strategic, to let an idea, that little spark of an idea, begin to become a blaze. We don't have room for any of that. We are in seamlessly connected, jammed activity from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And so the work that we do through training, consulting, writing, etc., is all to re-oxygenate human beings at work so they can finally have a breath and then let the spark that is within each and every one of them ignite.
In A Minute to Think, your book, let's talk a little tactically in terms of what are some of the first suggestions you have for people who, we know there's there's the great resignation happening right now. People are burnt out or in survival mode. We hear the feedback as well. What is the very first thing a company should do and the very first thing an individual should do in this tsunami?
Yes. And I'm so glad you separated individual and company because they are different.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the good news and the bad news of where we are. The bad news is that burnout is officially at 52% of human beings saying, I raise my hand, I call myself burnt out. The workday has expanded by 2.5 hours. The Zoomaholic 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. new thing is not going to break itself on its own. We're going to have to dismantle it purposefully. And that is all going to be pretty hard. But the beautiful news is that this window of redesign opportunity has been opened because everything is broken. So when we put it back together, we have an opportunity to look at the things that have driven us crazy about work for decades, and we can rewrite them right now. And we have to do it right now. There's this window, and then there's going to be this point where the amber cools again, and we're stuck like that mosquito for the next however many gajillion years. So we have to do it right now. We have to think deeply and passionately and proactively about how should work be, and then we change those things right now. So that's kind of the good news and the bad news of where we are.
And that makes sense. It's like this window of opportunity to re-envision and reset and rebuild in a different way. For an individual who's in constant rush, running off adrenaline, lacking the sleep, throwing their hands in the air and saying, hey, I'm done. I'm one of the individuals that everybody's writing about, and I don't have a place to go, but I don't care. I've saved and I'm good. Who's right there, maybe hasn't made that call yet. Is there advice that you have for them to maybe, before they make the jump, see if there's like 100% accountability portion, because it's not just a one-way street. There's many factors involved, but on their end, are there things they can do?
Yes, a million. So let's go as fast as I can. So here's a place that we're heading to, and then I'll go back to start from the beginning. It is very easy to blame the corporate mothership for everything. And if you work in a company where you don't control a lot, you can kind of throw up your hands and say, I have no choice but to quit because my environment is toxic. And sometimes that's true. And sometimes leadership doesn't get it and you should go away. But often there is a significant impact you can make within your own span of control before you leave. And there was a graphic we didn't put in the book that we were going to put in the book, which was the 12 core tools of the book. Which of them can you do completely on your own with no one else's permission? And which of them do you need cultural buy-in? And there were 10 and 2, 10 that you could utilize completely on your own, and 2 that, yes, you'd probably better if your manager believes this also. So I just want to say that maybe do some work on span of control first. But you asked me about a person on the edge, exhausted, pushing through, living on espresso. So here's what they do. They begin to insert what we call the wedge. The wedge is a little portion of the space that we're talking about. We haven't really labeled it. We should. We call it white space. And that white space came from looking at executive paper calendars in the days when I was coaching. And you could see that if there was white on the page, it was going to be a really good day with lots of possibility because there was space, right? So that white space does not always have to be big chunks. It can be little interstitial moments. And this is where we're going to start for that burnt out person. They're going to insert a wedge. And if you could see my fingers, they're pointing upward like a church steeple, a literal wedge of space inserted in between 2 activities that previously would have been connected to separate them. So we're opening up a little wedge, and we're opening up these moments between a meeting and a meeting, between receiving an email and responding, between a question and an answer, maybe between sitting down and diving in. We're adding interstitial space in lengths that are not intimidating. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, a minute. And we start to have a little bit of oxygen in the day. The second thing that person should do is take a full day off, but with zero expectation. Because burnout is not a hangover. It doesn't go away when you take a wellness day, but it will just give you a tiny reset. You'll feel probably exactly as burnt out when you wake up the next morning. But what it may embolden you to do is pick a manager then to talk to you about how you feel. And I say a manager instead of your manager, because the litmus test for this person is not who do you report to, it's who is the most loving executive at my company. Whether or not they are your executive, see if they would speak to you and share where you are. Just say, I'm pretending I'm okay. I'm struggling. I'm thinking about leaving. I need to craft a plan, and see if this person who you've identified as loving can begin to give you some perspective. That is the prescription for where I see people starting.
Brilliant. Because it's doable. That's very accessible. That's not asking someone to start meditating for 2 hours a morning or even 20 minutes or who knows what. It's doable.
This resignation is so interesting to me. And it's interesting to me that people are leaving, but it's not as interesting as the fact that they were previously staying. I have watched people stay in these environments of, we call it tolerated misery, this awful experience where work is the hardest part of your day. It's the part you complain about. It's the part you struggle to recover from. So honestly, if you said, are you shocked at the great resignation? I'm a little more shocked at the great retention that was happening before. So things are now coming to a head for companies, and throwing money at people is not the answer. The answer is meaning, trust, and autonomy. That when you give people enough time by reducing stupid work in favor of good work, that they can touch meaning, and when you give them autonomy and freedom, I believe that they will stay. And so I was asked in an interview, what do I think the future of work is going to be like? I always choose an optimistic lens. So I think that the answer to all of this is something called ROW. And I write about in the book, it's also how we run our company. ROW is a results-only work environment. That's not my term. I can't even remember if it's Dan Pink's that I've heard him talk about it, but we've used it for years and years and years. Results-only work environment means all we care about are results. And when employees are given the dignity and the freedom and the choicefulness of a results-only work environment, a lot of the things they hate drop away very naturally, and they make choices that serve them best. So if you are an employer and you start thinking about, how can I give more trust, meaning, and autonomy? How can I reduce unnecessary work? And how can I move maybe in the direction of a row or row-like environment? I think now you're building a recipe that makes you magnetic for people to stay.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. If you are digging this podcast, please do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment and it means a ton to us.
Let's talk about meetings for a second. I almost want to double down on ROW for just in terms of the first few steps, but if we have time, we're going to come back to that. But I want to make sure we get to a few other things. Meeting fatigue, which we know is real. For those who feel that they don't have a voice or option in the amount of meetings on their schedule, what do you have to say to them?
It is cultural, the amount that you're invited to, and there are absolutely people who can't seem to have a choice. So we're going to have to figure out how to get back to them. But let's talk about the fact that many of us say we don't have a choice, but really we just don't have the bravery or skills to opt out. Then there are teams that it never occurs to them to have people have permission to opt out. This comes back to that same topic of autonomy and trust, that if you're a person and you get a meeting invite and you look at that and you go, you know what, I'm going to be sitting there. I am neither going to be benefiting nor contributing by sitting in that meeting. You should figure out a way to opt out. And it is not always easy. We like to say that people should get a nobody, which is a partner that you can practice with. So maybe I would call you and I'd say, can I talk through this with you? Can I say the way that I'm thinking of saying no? And you tell me, does it sound entitled, or like I'm not a team player, or does it sound logical? You might have to even practice the language that you want to write in an email or that you want to say to a person, but you must develop the skill of saying, I don't think I add value here. Is it possible that I can skip this meeting? And when that becomes normed, norming is what is the powerful wave that carries us along. And all of these practices, a few more people try it, and then a couple more people try it. And maybe you give the supervisor my book, and then maybe a couple more people. And then slowly it becomes a little bit more of a norm. Then it gets easier for everyone. But that primary skill of saying, I don't belong here, is not one that we can skip and just go to, what do I do if I have no power?
That's really good. I love the filter of, am I benefiting or contributing? And going from there, because then you actually have some justification to back up your no too, of, hey, this is actually in the best interest of everybody that I'm not there.
Whenever you can put a quantification lens to your argument, you win in a professional environment. As an example, let's say you get your small team together and you just ask each other, what percentage of our meetings feel unnecessary? And maybe it's 20%, 30%. And you could go next to your manager and say, we had a casual verbal poll, and we're feeling like about 20 to 25% of the meetings we're sitting in don't really feel tactically relevant to business, or like they're moving things forward, or we're sitting with same role peers in a redundant role in the same meeting. Can we talk about it? The number is the conversation starter. We are noticing that approximately 20% of our meetings. We are noticing that approximately 30% of our meetings. When you start a conversation with a number, you win in getting the attention of people in professional environments. So that's just a little way that people can enter that conversation.
I love this. This is so good. The other, feedback, of course, is I'm drowning in notifications popping up. I've got my email, I've got my Slack or my Microsoft Teams, I've got my DMs and my texts, and managing the amount of inbound communication and places to have to respond. What are your thoughts on that?
I have in my head this one last thing I was going to say about meetings. I was building up to the primary rule for immediate relief. Remember, we talked about those little wedges. Is if you use the wedge on your calendar, what it looks like is you say to yourself, never let the colors touch. And what that means is when you're looking at the day, you don't want a paint swatch with all the colors touching. You want stripes of white, and that's those wedges, and that's that restorative time. So we want to move toward that. You did ask me a question I never answered to as we conclude meetings, which is, what do you do when you're the person who has no control? You're too junior to opt out. You're too junior to reconfigure your meetings so the colors aren't touching. You're just in that 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. pain as much as you can, as much of the day as they put you in. It's a pretty powerless position, and I don't want to pretend that there is an easy exit there, but I would go back to that idea of find one manager, find one person that feels approachable, even if they're not your manager, and talk to them about that. And I just think that those two pieces put the button on meetings in a way that's important before we move to email.
That's good. I love the never let the colors touch. I just came from a lunch, and one of the individuals is without her assistant, and she's been scheduling on her own, and she did not think through travel time, right? That's a way to really give yourself a curveball and additional anxiety of, we don't time travel. But how many times, even if you're at home between, before we button up meetings, do you have any best practices for running an effective meeting? Time, amount of people, agenda, any of that?
Yeah, 90% of the effective meeting begins before the meeting. So that slice of white that I just described to you, let's say it's 10 minutes, it is for a very specific purpose. I would say there's 3 components. You look backward. That means you look at the meeting that just finished. Do you enter a note? Do you get organized? Do you get something out of your brain? Or do you maybe just say, how did that go? Then you look within. Now we're in the middle of our slice of white. I'm a human being. Should I close my eyes for 30 seconds? Am I hungry? Do I need a bio break? I need to refresh myself. And then you look forward to the next meeting. what exactly do I want out of this meeting? What do I need to prepare and have in front of me? What aspect of myself do I want to bring? This is so important if you're in a sales role or any kind of role where you're persuading. Who am I showing up to this meeting? When you do those things before the ding and you dial in, you're already fueled to be incredibly effective during that meeting. Inside the meeting, my favorite current advice, and we did it together today, is I'm asking people to turn their cameras off, which is very counterintuitive, but there's a wonderful piece of research that Adam Grant circulated that shows that the collective intelligence of a group of listeners is actually higher when the cameras are off. And that is because a million micro distractions of, oh, that's a cute dog, and does my hair look messy? And all of that goes away. And we're listening like a good old fashioned conference call. And the reason I asked you if we could turn cameras off is I think I listen better. I think I'm freer. And I've advocated this for so many corporate teams. And as soon as they turn it off, they go, oh, that kind of feels nice. And it's really a lot of what our bodies need. So yeah, sometimes on for hard moments or confrontation or creativity, or maybe watching a pitch close or something like that, but off a lot of the time now is really important.
A question for you on that. Is there concern that if it's a large enough group, people are tuned out if they have their camera off?
This is that interesting trust thread that we talked about a second ago. I had one time in my career of running a fully virtual company since the day that we were born. One time I had a sales guy who pretended to work. And when he left, we looked at his email and found he hadn't really been working one time. And other than that, I think people work really hard most of the time. If they're in a giant meeting where all you're seeing anyway is a tiny 1 by a half an inch thumbnail of them, I don't know if you can really tell if they're multitasking under the desk anyway. But that's that trust piece is, I really believe that it is a paralyzing constraint of good work, creativity, and team unity to be staring at someone as the way to see if they are working.
Yeah, good point. No, it's interesting because there's Zoom fatigue too, and showing up, the term showing up can be translated and or defined in a lot of different ways. Does that mean like physically, visually, or no, is your brain turned on? Or are you thinking, like you said, with collective intelligence? So interesting. Okay, so thank you. Let's talk inbound communication. Like we're just getting hit from every angle. And I'm in email debt right now. I can't dig myself out fast enough. I've stopped trying. What do I do?
A story comes to mind of this guy that I met at a car company that I think will set a tone for talking about email. He had this super, super relaxed, attached relationship with his email. And he was a middle manager in a car company. Usually middle managers don't have that. They're sort of pressed from the bottom and pressed from the top. So I asked him how he got that way. And he told me a story. He said when he was very young in the company, he was selling cars. He worked on the lot, and every Wednesday and Friday, because this was pre-email, they got a communication envelope, which was one of those old manila envelopes with the little stringy thing that you put around the circle to tie it closed. And Wednesday, he'd start reading the Wednesday one, and he wouldn't quite be done. And then he would get the Friday one. And then the paper started piling up on his desk because he wasn't keeping up, and it was keeping him from selling cars, which was his job. So he went to one of the senior guys on the lot named Dimitri, and he said, "What do you do with these?" And Dimitri didn't say anything, and he just said, "Follow me." And he walked him out to the trunk of his car, and he opened the car, and in the trunk of his car was exactly 3 things: a jack, a case of water, and a gigantic box of unopened manila envelopes. And he said, I write the date on it. I throw it in here. And if nobody asks me anything about it in 3 months, I throw it out. And nobody ever asks anything. Now, I always have to preface, because I get in trouble with the corporate people, if that story has a little bit of playful irreverence in terms of what was in those envelopes might have been important. What is in your email obviously is important. But he told me that he realized that just because communication is made does not necessarily mean that it's really important. And he learned to install a filter to tone down the emotionality of, I got to look at this and I got to look at that. And he just calmed his relationship with the inbound communication. And that changed the rest of his career. And before we talk about tactics, that emotional detachment of really understanding that a lot of it is less important than we think is very, very important, just as a starting point.
That's helpful. I think it's extremely, your relationship and your emotional, physical, and physiological responses that happen as those dings and new messages are coming in. Great setup. And now.
Okay. So first of all, we have to realize that we live in an environment of hallucinated urgency everywhere we look. And it's not just email, it's kind of everything. It's sort of this toe tapping, pen clicking, hyperactive kind of feeling, like the metronome of the day. So the way that what that shows up in for email is we tend to treat every incoming email as if it was urgent, even when it's not. The first thing that we have to do is begin to triage. So the first thing that we do is understand that there are levels of urgency for everything. Things can be not time sensitive. This happens. Things can be tactically time sensitive. That means that for that one, your speed to response is actually business relevant. And that is the place where you bring out speed. But then there's this third really interesting catch-all category where things are emotionally time sensitive, which means they're masquerading as tactically time sensitive, but really it's just curiosity or anxiety or control. And we have never had as much free-floating anxiety as we have in this terrible period of ambiguity. And so a lot of that just gets channeled into this hyperactive relationship with email. Step number one is to ask yourself if something is time sensitive or not. If you're in a team, you should put that in the subject line of the email. Due by Wednesday, needed by end of day, no rush. So first of all, now we're cueing each other. And if you're an entrepreneur, you can do this with vendors and back and forth. First of all, we're taking some of the hallucinating part out, and we're actually talking in terms of true urgency. Next, I want to teach you a tool called the yellow list. And this is really the one that sucks down that email volume. You probably have a couple core people that you work with on your team, or maybe core vendors. I would propose that you begin a yellow list for each of them. It's just a document in your computer for each person. It says Sean yellow list, Donna yellow list, Devin yellow list. When you're about to send an email, you ask yourself, is it time sensitive? If this need is time sensitive, it should actually be a text or a phone call, because those are synchronous mediums and email is not. Now you've eliminated some. If it's not time sensitive, then you say to yourself, as your fingers are poised above the keyboard about to type it, you go, wait a minute, could I just put this on the yellow list? And most of the time you can. So you just jot down the question or the thing or the idea or the communication. And when you have a minute, you ping the person, you say, hey, can we have a yellow list debrief? And you go boom, 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 boom through that list verbally, easily. It gives you three-dimensionality in case you want to talk about something challenging or creative. And best of all, you cannot CC someone on a conversation. And so we start parsing what would have been email into these yellow lists. Then we cue everybody else to do the same. And then that's when the volume really, really starts dropping.
What a way to, we think about time boxing and batching conversations, instead of these a million small things ping-ponging around. What are your thoughts on voice notes? My team and I are pretty big on voice notes. It doesn't require taking the time to schedule, which is I get anxiety about just trying to schedule things, and finding it in the back and forth. And let's talk about that in a second. But yeah, just voice notes. You can hear sentiment, you can hear tone.
They allow humanness into that. The thread of the two-dimensionality is a lot of times it's misread, or we don't. If you want to say sorry to somebody, way better on a voice note where you can go, I wanted to be there and I couldn't be there, and they can hear the humanness in your voice. There's a lot of places where that's really important.
Amazing. Okay. Now, This ping-ponging of scheduling back and forth thing drives me up a wall. And yes, there are assistants, virtual assistants, Calendlies, but then they all come with their own set of challenges. What are some of the best practices around like finding a time to connect?
Well, I'm wondering, I have a brilliant person who does that for me. And so I think I'm a little divorced, maybe, if I think about it from the pain of that. Mm-hmm. The challenges around finding time to connect, though, I think are currently stemming from that we think we need a pre-planned meeting for everything. And we're so afraid of ad hoc that we schedule and schedule and schedule. So, if I love the phone, I love the good old fashioned phone. If I see a phone number on a meeting invite, my face lights up. But if I pick up a phone, let's say I had an idea for you, or maybe I wanted to invite you somewhere, I would usually, as a very 3D type person, want to hear your voice if I could. So I might go, oh, I'm just going to call her. And now that feels like the most egregious affront to your privacy to just pick up a phone without having scheduled and just call you. But I would like to rent a hippie bus and travel the country on Bring Back the Phone tour, because I love the feeling when the phone rings and it's somebody that I didn't expect. And I think if we could embrace a little bit more of this permission to be ad hoc, maybe we wouldn't need to schedule so much in the first place. And so then we wouldn't be trying to fit the square peg of too many meetings in the round hole of these apps.
I think, Jen, with my first company, I noticed people wouldn't pick up the phone. It just wasn't, especially some of the younger individuals on the team, they just weren't used to picking up the phone and calling the client or calling the partner. And it became a challenge. Everything was either text or email. Are you seeing that in terms of just a generational thing?
Yes, absolutely. The language that we use around it, you've heard me kind of sort of mention it, is there's 2-dimensional content and 3-dimensional content. There are also 2-dimensional mediums and 3-dimensional mediums. And where people get in trouble is they mix and match. So if you have 2D content, which is simple or fact-driven, basic information, it belongs in a 2D medium. That's email, text, chat. It's really simple, doesn't have a lot of nuance. If you have 3D content, you want to have it create an innovation. You want to fire someone. You want to ask a really difficult question. You want to ask for a raise. That's 3-dimensional. It's challenging. It has nuance. That goes in a 3D medium, phone call, face-to-face. If you mix and match them, you shove 2D content into a 3D medium. Now that's when we're sitting in a meeting and we're just listening to report outs that could have been sent in an attachment. And if you put 3D content into a 2D medium, that's when you get those 40 thread long email chains, because people are trying to work something out that's 3-dimensional in a 2-dimensional place. So that language is actually very, very clarifying for people. You can start in on an email thread and somebody who knows it will say, I'm sorry, 3D. And oh, yep, we realize we're in the wrong medium for the message. So that's a very clarifying place where you'll need less meetings to begin with, because you'll know what belongs in 2D.
I love it. Just knowing how to work in different scenarios as a team that aligns and agrees upon the best practice. What question, just to wrap us up here, what question am I not asking that I should be, given this incredible situation and window of opportunity to redesign and rebuild differently? What's on your mind the most right now?
I'm really worried about hybrid, to be honest with you. I'm really worried that the empathy needed is missing, because busy leaders are doing their best, but they're buried in stuff they have to be doing. And they're deciding this hybrid thing without really, really stepping into the shoes of humans. There's a wonderful comedy video going around that's kind of about this, but they used to work in the office. They were comfortable. Then we put them at home. They had to go home. We didn't put them. They had to go home. They were uncomfortable. Then they became comfortable. Now, hybrid is, I don't pack up your stuff this day, put it back on this desk, put it on that desk. If hybrid is by choice, again, that autonomy, results only work environment, and you're saying to people, work where you feel like it, that's one thing. But if hybrid is assigned, you will be in the office Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you'll be home Tuesday, Thursday. I'm deeply concerned that just is going to break people who have used up all their change coupons at this point and have no more flexibility left to be resilient. I think we're going to lose more people. I think more people are going to become demotivated because of that. So I think that's probably the topic we haven't touched.
Any thoughts on solutions and how we can start experimenting with an innovative approach?
Yes, let people choose. Let adults choose. Let grown-ups say, I would like to work here or there on these days and that days, and then work your real estate problems around it.
Gotcha, yeah.
Ask people first instead of assigning.
It's interesting because it does turn into a real estate driven, budget line item that if people get to decide, yes, you can, or you don't have to, it's hard to plan for that. You've got all this open space, but do you need them to decide with finality and you're either at home or you're at work? It's the gray that I think makes it tricky with the real estate.
It's a real concern. You can't plan for desk space or hoteling space if you don't know how many people. But it's the angle from which the problem is solved. One angle is, I am an authority figure and I'm going to do research and ask consultants to tell me where you should sit, and I'll tell you. And the other angle is, I'm going to get you to tell me where you would like to sit, and I'll figure it out. And if I'm not saying to allow employees to improvisationally choose every single day an unpredictable schedule, but make them commit for 6 months or a year or 3 months and say, tell us what you like. Let's poll everybody and figure out how many desks we need and how many home office setup budgets we need. And then let's find something that caters to the need of the person. The needs of the person are screaming, high performers and high achievers, and the talent that we want is screaming, this is time for me to get what I need. Or they're leaving. That's where we started with this.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that solution because it's manageable. Like, that's possible. That really is. Yeah. It's not a wish and a hope. Wow. I could continue on and on. I love how you get into the literal, Juliet. You're like, you've got the answers. You're bringing them. And everyone needs your book. I appreciate you. And I feel like I can say, hey, I knew her when, because it was like white space even 10 years ago. Maybe it wasn't 10. I'm exaggerating, but it's amazing how you've seen this coming, and it just continues to become more and more of a huge thing. So thank you for your time and your energy and the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And sharing your wisdom with us today.
It was great. It was a really fun conversation.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your why not now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?